This week, we welcome Tys Sbano, Cloud Chief Information Security Officer at Sisense. In the Leadership and Communications section, the 5 enemies of trustworthy leadership, 5 things leaders do that stifle innovation, what's your purpose, Big Tech's 7 favorite interview questions, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show about security startups, how to secure your startup, and advice for security startups. It's Business Security Weekly.
I need it from the top.
The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 146, recorded October 7th, 2019. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here in Colorado. I can finally wear the Broncos quarter zip because they finally won a game this weekend.
You know, you can still wear it when they lose.
Congratulations.
No, I won't. I just can't do it.
I'm a fan of my team whether we win or lose. We happen to win a lot.
Yeah,
I mean,
and joining me from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island are my co-hosts Paul Asadorian and Jason Albuquerque, and diehard Patriots fans.
It's a wonderful Monday again.
Of course it is. Of course it is. There's only so many more wonderful Mondays, though, I think.
Yeah, because it's going to be a wonderful Thursday here pretty soon.
That's true. That's true.
Well, that means it's a wonderful Friday if they win on Thursday.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right, the new Security Weekly website is officially live. Please visit securityweekly.com and check out all of our new sorting and filtering functionality. Please let us know if you find any issues or have any feedback by sending an email to website@securityweekly.net.
Just don't click on tags.
The website's awesome, by the way.
Thank Matt.
Thank you,
we
Matt.
have a couple little issues there we're still tweaking through. We caught most of the biggies, but a couple little ones like tags for some reason aren't rendering correctly. I have a couple other little fixes, but all in all,
I can get them to render correctly if you put question mark show underscore type equals shows. I think that's what I sent you. Yeah, they work. I can't figure out how to get that into the system. So we're close.
Okay.
We have
we'll
a solution. We just got to implement it or figure out how.
And since we have the new website live, you can now use the survey dropdown and select the 2019 listener survey to give us your annual feedback, or the 5 stages of automation maturity to help us measure your degree of security automation. Both sets of surveys will be represented in webcasts. Lastly, EC Council is now offering our listeners a free pass to attend Hacker Halted or the Global CISO Forum if you're a CISO, held in Atlanta, Georgia, this week, October 10th and 11th. Please use discount code HH19SW when you register, or go to securityweekly.com/hackerhalted and register there. All right, our guest for this first segment is Tys Sbano, is an information security leader with over 13 years of experience, mainly in financial technology organizations. Currently, Ty is the Cloud Chief Information Security Officer at Sisense, who acquired Periscope data in May 2019. Ty's career has been focused on developing application and product security programs for Capital One, JP Morgan Chase, Lending Club, and Target. Tys' security mentality has been concentrated on enabling engineering and product teams to securely move at the speed of business to make it a competitive advantage. Ty, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it. And I also loved how you introed your website, because I know you're security people. You literally said you can message us with any issues or bugs before you even talk about functionality. So I really love that mentality.
Yes, Ty, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. And yes, we do receive a lot of reports on our website security,
I'm sure.
which is, I'm glad people tell us, right?
Absolutely.
I'm happy when people tell us about that stuff.
Feedback is key.
And then who fixes them? Who's your vuln management person?
Usually me, although
Yeah.
we do have a WordPress contractor as well, which is
Cool.
a nice help.
Yeah, the WordPress guy really helps us with some of those new plugins that make filtering and sorting and finding content a whole lot easier.
Nice.
But I know we missed something somewhere, so
Very cool.
tried our best. But I couldn't wait anymore. I told Paul last week, it's time to
good.
roll.
It's all good, yeah. I mean, sometimes you got to pull the ripcord, right? I mean, that's here on Business Security Weekly, right? Those are the kind of executive decisions you'll be making likely in a C-level role in
Absolutely.
technology, right?
And then it's continuous improvement from there.
Exactly. All right, Ty, let's get to the interview. So first, give us a little background. How'd you get into security? Let's start there, and then we'll figure out how'd you end up being a cloud CISO? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll get into current state a little bit more, but let's start with the cliche, I didn't choose security, security chose me. But I think the big thing is when I was a kid, I always had that mentality of breaking things. And sometimes it was dismantling phones, computers, systems, hardware hacking was always kind of cool to me. But eventually in my teenage years, as I had a great public education, I'm very thankful for it, I had the opportunity to start to get into more information security. And that led me down a path of really focusing on web application security. And that's ultimately how we connected, Matt. And I'm really grateful to be here. But my journey started as really a teenager that was just curious. How do I get things to work? And then ultimately, how do I get things to work for me in a benefit that maybe it wasn't designed for? So with that, when I set out to finally go into the world of higher education, I got some scholarship opportunities to schools that just didn't resonate with me and topics that I think I would have been pretty miserable in being a part of. But I did get an opportunity at Penn State University to join the College of Information and Science and Technology. They had a subdomain of security within it, and I ended up joining and doing a 4-year degree there. And it really harnessed the power. So we were backed by the NSA. We had security labs that had multi-millions of dollars. So we were cracking wireless before that was even a consistent concept with tooling. We were doing actual configuration of Cisco PIXs, and that paid dividends later when I'm doing firewall reviews and assessments as a consultant. But it really just started as a kid with a curiosity, and then it led into formal education, and then through a career. So the career is really, it stems from consulting for a couple of years, finding that fintech at the time when I was about 2 years deep into consulting took security the most seriously. So they would actually do remediation. They would invest in new tech. They would try and break their own stuff, which a lot of other organizations, 10, 12 years ago, just, I want to be honest, didn't give a shit. And I think that's where we're seeing this tide turn, and more people are aware of what is security beyond physical guards and a firewall. It's now becoming a comprehensive touch point throughout the entire business lifecycle, not just the software development lifecycle, but how we do everything. So with that, fintech was fun for me. I went from consulting to JP Morgan Chase, kind of built out the application security pipeline for static analysis, some end-to-end dynamic scanning, but it was pretty early on. I was young, but it felt crazy to me that a 26-year-old had the opportunity to lead the charge in the AppSec domain at a 250,000 person, like the amount of people that were there, 250,000 people were there, and they were trusting a guy like me to actually run a lot of the application security functions in partnership with a larger entity. From there, switched over to Capital One, got my master's from Norwich, Masters of Information Assurance, and that really kind of rounded out some of the areas of saying, I want to become a CISO. I think this is one of the patterns that most people go after, which is a master's degree, but this degree specifically was focused on writing, which I still kind of suck at, grammar, things I can't speak well. But then it really hit on the element of thinking at a higher level for a comprehensive program. So at that point, while I was at Capital One, I became inspired to actually charge after the career goal of becoming a chief information security officer. And one of the big influencers of my career was Sydney Klein. She showed me a different side of security, which was more the inclusive aspect, creating an environment that allowed people to freely think and exist within their own sort of comfort zones, but stretching in a way that allowed them to achieve real talent, real potential. And kind of taking that mentality, I was able to play it forward. I became a people manager at Capital One. I built out the application security function there, built out a red team in the very first iteration of it. Then ultimately found kind of the hard stop where I needed to switch out from Capital One, and I went over to Target. Spent about a year there, exactly 1 year, built out this thing called product security that's in the hands of an amazing set of people now, and then shifted out to California. And once I was out in California, I joined a company called Blending Club, worked on their application security function as well as security engineering, but really worked through some interesting scenarios that led me to become very confident that I could take on the reins of running all things security. So it was just time, place, and a recruiter reaching out saying, hey, would you be interested in this opportunity? And it was to run a full security program. Who knew I would be doing IT, enjoying some legal work, doing a lot of privacy work, but really being ingrained in the business throughout the entire life cycle of a Series B company to go through a Q2 transformation where Periscope data gets acquired by Sisense. I kept my job, which is crazy and fun all at the same time. I have a new title, and I'm going to have a new title in like a couple of weeks, just based on changes that were happening. So it's cool to go through that process and still continue to level up.
Some of the things that happened in your career are pretty interesting to me, right? I did not go for a security degree or even a security specialization when I was in college. I was an electrical engineer, fell in love with computers and decided to get my master's in computer engineering. Security came way after the fact. You kind of had a path on what really drove you, and you kind of focused your education around that, which I think is really interesting.
Well, Matt,
and
many of us are probably old enough that there weren't many, if at all, cybersecurity programs when we were in school.
It was ingrained in IT. It was just a component of IT.
Do computer science.
Exactly right. Yeah,
so
most of us learned
really
on the fly.
Like one of the first iterations, and when I look at the graduate classes before mine, so I was the third class through this university at Penn State. I was still figuring it out. A fair amount ended up in consulting. A lot ended up behind help desk, and some just never got it together and did different things. But my first job out of school as a consultant, 65% of my pay was going towards rent, and I saved no money, but I just kept grinding hundreds of hours every week just to make sure that we were learning and doing and growing. But it was an investment in that future career, which I think many, probably without degrees or formal education focused on security, had to do, right? So as a need or a requirement, you're doing like IT, or you're running a technical function, or you're building an engineering team, and you happen to do security as opposed to you should just focus on security. And I think the difference was it wasn't top of mind 12, 15 years ago. So I think creating educational programs behind it, we're starting to see that cycle now with data science, with ML. And I think it's pretty exciting for students that realize that early in their life, that get a chance to just start at the beginning. So I'm one of those people in security that when they say, how did you get in? I think just almost naturally. And I had an educational path to get there, plus really strong fucking mentors that helped me become the person I am.
Yeah, and I mean, you made some really wise career choices. I think, fintech was really early into security, still extremely mature when it comes to security programs. So you kind of learn through those environments, which I think is great to get that hands-on knowledge. You also came at it from the application security side, which a lot of CISOs don't necessarily do. Some come from physical security or from the networking side. I've seen very few actually come from the application security side, which I think is interesting in kind of where we are today with DevOps and cloud and this transformation into the application side. I think it's a really interesting, unique skill set.
Yeah, I think the benefit is I've chosen 2 or 3 recruiters that I've been friends with for multiple years. And this is one of the career advantages that I think I've gotten lucky and figured out. So Joel Abraham, I've done business with him once, but we've been friends for much longer. And having that discussion, building opportunity, hearing from a recruiter that's dedicated to our area has helped me lay the groundwork for that insight. So I think in the past 2 years, there's become a bigger rise because software's been eating the world. Everything's becoming an API. People are starting to give a shit about their application, regardless if the tags work or don't work. But now we have this unique opportunity within AppSec that spreads across the entire organization. Everything from training all the way to incident response. I think there's just so many touch points that allow you to have a clear, distinct understanding of how the business, how development, how the organization fundamentally works, which can create, I think, some pretty strong folks in the security space outside of just purely the AppSec play.
Right. So in your new role as Cloud CISO, what are some of the big challenges you have to face? I mean, Paul and I talk a lot about this on a weekly basis, but for somebody that's in the trenches, what are some of those big problems and challenges you need to solve on a daily basis?
Yeah, so the biggest one right now is merging two cultures. One with Periscope data, which was cloud native, multi-tenant, all your data in the cloud environment. So we had a lot of progressive early stage companies and a lot of organizations that were fully committed to kind of the Periscope roadmap of where we were going. And with that, the security mantras within the organization are much different than a company that is 16 years old, 100% on-prem, had just gotten into a cloud managed service in the past 2 years. And how people think about security in the sales lifecycle is completely different. So when you're a company that operates natively in AWS and you're selling to another company that wants to, say, put it in their AWS environment, but Periscope didn't offer that at the time, we would have to talk about controls, compliance, audits, go through the thousands of questionnaires that have to come in to make sure everyone's comfortable before they put their data somewhere. And the reality is, not all data teams go through their security team. But on the flip side, the cultural difference of an organization that hasn't had to fight those battles, that hasn't had to build those muscles, that's where we're really focused on now. So while there's the internal element of our cultural DNA of how we build security in, the cool thing is we're starting on a new unified SaaS product where we're taking the best of both worlds. We're shifting, we're figuring out how to put it all together. But we have a new dedicated environment that's really focused there. And as a security person, building in security from the start is a blessing in disguise to start with all the lessons, leaving all the tech debt, and just building it right from the start. And being a part of the journey is great. The other part of this is internally, we have the opportunity to really educate our culture through this process and growth of where we're going as an organization. We're one of the last big non-publicly traded players in the data space. So it allows for a very unique experience compared to, say, early startups or ones that just recently exited. They got bought up by Google or Salesforce, and we have those that really validate our business model. And the last thing, I'm sure we all struggle with it, building within the culture of the sales enablement process, right? So understanding at the core, why does security exist? And if the business isn't making money, then the answer is security probably doesn't need to exist. But when you start looking at how do you enable the business to move faster because you say have your SOC 2 Type 2, you have ISO compliance, you have HIPAA, it greases the wheels to make it a much smoother process as opposed to you're starting from scratch and you're trying to build trust and confidence with people that may not have it. And as a security practitioner, not talking to always security practitioners, maybe it's a legal or IT entity, it's always best when those security people talk. But business processes typically in most organizations don't enable that sort of interaction.
Yeah. Paul, this sounds familiar. We went through one of these transitions once. I'm curious, Ty, how are you addressing these aspects? So let's start with culture first. I think that's a really big one to overcome, right? You've got one company that's used to having everything on-prem, which has a level of visibility and control around it, versus the cloud side. How do you address some of those cultural differences? How does some of those communications work? How do you educate them on the value of moving some of these services into a cloud environment?
Yep. And this is where I take a lot of my lessons learned around software security and product security. The goal is education. The goal is building buy-in and people caring about security. So we have really started a new campaign. And I think it's always lovely when you get to align with something as great as, National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I think that's probably a big theme right now. And That creates general awareness outside, but we're also making it hit home. We want people to operate with ease, but also understand that all the lessons you learn within the organization aren't just for here, they're for the rest of your career, they're for your home life. Just protecting your privacy is an element that we want our employees to be educated upon for how we do sales, how we honor GDPR, how we honor things like CCPA that are coming up, and what that means for our employees in our California office, including myself. How do we exercise those rights in a changing world? And if they're more empowered here within the office, it's crazy to see what they do outside the organization and identifying, hey, these are opportunities. And sometimes it's like, hey, Ty, I'm glad we're not this company, or hey, maybe here's a lesson learned. Like, I got this email from this company about them changing this security feature. Can we put this in our marketing efforts in the future? So planting that seed and letting it sow within individuals is a big part of how you go through these transformations. And for me, it's a lot of communication, and then going through the process of figuring out what is the right amount of communication before people get burnout or they're sick and tired of seeing your face. And I think that's where I want to be present. When I'm asked to be present, I will be there 100%. But then there are times you have to not always be the speaking voice saying security, security, security. Sometimes it can be security, trust, confidence, enablement, and you're touching all throughout the business and not just beating the dead horse of like, why do we choose this third-party supplier? And they disappeared with all of our HR money and all of our payments. And that's like one of the crazier stories, I think, of this past quarter. And it's not one for us, but you read it in the news with, the payroll company that went out.
Yeah, Ty, no, I think the story's great. I mean, I went through a similar transition with an acquisition of my company 3 years ago. And I had the opportunity as CISO to kind of start with that blank slate and build the security team as a strategic arm of the organization. And the key for me was really building relationships across the entire organization, across every business unit, and really putting forth the fact that security needs to be a trusted advisor across the entire organization. And I don't know if you can speak to how you kind of do that within your organization, but for me, it was making sure that I had constant touch points and trust with all of those stakeholders, all of my peers throughout the entire organization. And not only at that level, I made sure that all levels within my team had a relationship with someone within every business unit as well. So my directors have a relationship with the directors, right? My managers have relationships with the managers, and we're constantly getting that feedback loop across the entire organization and having the conversations about how can we strategically enable the business, right? It's business alignment from my perspective. How do we support the mission of our organization while always evangelizing for security? Make it a differentiator, make it a competitive advantage, have those conversations with the marketing team about what we're doing and putting it out there to our clients, right? So I don't know if you can give a little bit of your insight as to how you did that in your organization, because I know a lot of folks up and coming in the security field who want to be managers, who want to be directors, who want to be CISOs. That's what they're going to have to do to be strategic in the organization and to show they're not a cost center, right? To show that they're actually enabling the business.
Yeah, I think the cost, you hit it, right? I think your experience speaks through your statements there. And when I think of those relationships, it's no different than we were a California-based organization, 2 quarters ago, where I have individuals within my team that are building individual relationships across the organization to have reality, to have this thing that I think as security practitioners, we don't always think about, which is empathy. And not all the time are we going to be able to solve for everything or disable 2FA everywhere. Like, no one's doing that. But listening and caring and hearing and saying, you know what, that's a thoughtful point. Like, I just got an email today saying, a phishing campaign was a little too direct and it used a topic that scared them. So I took that moment. It was written in a language I can't read, which is Hebrew. But from the context of the message, taking the moment of that live coaching and interaction with a trusted partner and not just saying, okay, got it, but taking the time and showing, like, not just showing, but like really caring of here's what I think. Also say, I can't read the language, but from the intent of this message, I didn't vet all of the campaign emails that went out this time, but we're making adjustments. I'll take this into consideration as we're adjusting for next year. But from the grand scheme of why phishing, why this sort of stress, this is exactly why phishing exists, because we want folks to take action. We want them to think. We want them to evaluate, well, why would you have my work email? Why would you message me about this subject? Where is this email coming from? Is this real? Can I just do the drop down and say this is phishing and move on with my life? Or Did I have the full cycle realization and I can provide feedback back to the team to say, hey, this scared me? And part of me says, that's a good thing. Like, you had the moment, you evaluated it, but this is what a lot of these malicious actors prey on. So I think when it comes to that interaction or that reality check, I'm with you. I think there's an element of checking in, building a big partnership across the organization. And the good thing right now is we're growing so rapidly into different areas of our organization, specifically in strategic enterprise sales, that I'm able to start with brand new leaders that are just joining for this journey. And I think picking your partners is very critical as part of success for the overall organization. Yeah. If you're that security team that sits back and you wait for people to come to you, I don't think that's going to be the best career story, because you're going to miss so many things, as opposed to, oh yeah, we're closing that large deal. We're creating a new authentication flow specifically for that customer, or perhaps we're enabling this new third-party integration that we haven't done before, and it's a unique sub-processor. And here's how we honor GDPR. And like, you get to go through those scenarios much more effectively, as opposed to, I never got the email.
Agree. I mean, if you're sitting on your heels and you're not going actively out to the business to learn the business, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? The business is never going to learn you as a security program. So, can
I ask you a question?
Sure, absolutely.
I'm curious, from that last example, of all that effort you put in, what was the pivot point, or what was the moment you had the realization that, all of your efforts were effective, you're feeling confident about where things are going, you're getting invited to meetings? Like, at what moment did you have that? Because I'm literally going through these things now, just trying to figure out, when do I call this success?
Right. My epiphany moment that the business valued security and we played a strategic role.
Was when we asked you to be on the show?
That was the start. That was phase one, right? That was phase one.
Joking.
Phase two was actually probably about, almost 2 years ago, where my leadership team brought me in and actually said, listen, we're going to elevate the role of the CISO, and you're going to report directly to the CEO and the ownership of the company. Because we're still privately held. We're a very large MSP professional services organization. But they found value in the program that I built, to the point where I was strategically helping opportunities close, right? Yeah. I mean, conversations around security were literally the pivot point to sell our managed services, because they trusted our architecture, they trusted our people, they trusted the security program. So at that point, as I'm doing, executive briefings for customers, multi-billion-dollar customers, my CEO actually said, listen, we want to elevate the role. You're going to have a seat at the ELT, the executive leadership team, starting, January 1st. And for me, that was the realization of, number one, and this is a very important thing for me, your organization values security as a business enabler, right? That showed me the value. And the second piece was giving me the runway to develop the program the way I wanted to. Right? So it's develop it, develop my staff, develop the program, develop our externally facing services, have more influence with the CTO who designs our client facing services and products. Being able to have influence at that level for me was huge, right? At that point, that was my pivotal moment that said, did the right things, have the right relationships, communicated correctly, building the right team who's valued and trusted throughout the organization. Now we just got elevated up to the ELT, the executive leadership level.
It's interesting hearing Jason and Ty talk and just kind of take it all in. The topic of trust came up in different huge areas, right? And I think when we talk about phishing, something I was talking about in another show was, I think the thing, if I sit back and think about, well, who usually doesn't succumb to phishing? A lot of us in security usually don't, right? Because we don't go by the old adage of trust but verify. We instinctively distrust and verify before we take any action. Sure. And I'm like, how do we enable the users of our organization to have that same culture and have it bleed into our culture? Yep. And Jason, you brought up an interesting point with trust, since you're selling to IT and security people. And now we just established that we're the bunch, I used to say we're a skeptical bunch, but we distrust and then we verify. If I can sit down with you and verify things with you, now that leads to trust. And now, since you're winning customers, you're earning trust of the business. So a lot of it comes down to relationship building with your users, with your management, with your customers.
Right. And I mean, the perfect example with Ty, right? He had somebody come back with valid feedback. It made them feel a certain way. So now Ty's going to go back and he's going to work with that business leader to find the balance, right? Because it's always going to be that balance. How do I get the effectiveness of this phishing campaign while not having the feedback that I just got, right? Mitigating that level of feedback. So let's work together. I'll send you scripts of what I'm thinking, and then tell me how you feel about it, and then these are the type of scripts we can use, right? And I'm sure having multi-language is a struggle as well. So having someone who speaks the language, because perception's reality, right? You may say things a certain way because you're translating in a certain way, but it's not perceived that way. So that can be a struggle too. So having that business relationship with the folks who give you the feedback and honestly listening. At the end of the day, as security folks, we need to listen more and dictate less.
And you're enabling them.
We really, really do.
And engaging them. And I still maintain the most effective phishing campaign is 2 emails per user. The first one is an obvious phish that they can report. The second one is a fake email from IT saying, hey, thank you so much for reporting. Click here to get your reward. That would have a really high success rate, and it preys upon what we're trying to build in our organizations.
I think that's a fantastic campaign. It will likely be very successful.
And I put that out there, so hopefully we can build that awareness into our campaign so our users don't fall for that, but it's really hard.
Yeah. I mean, like I mentioned, having that level of, number one, listening and taking the feedback, adjusting your strategy to meet those needs. Those are the relationship building exercises you go through that builds the trust. Now you have an evangelist. Ty listened to what I said. He heard it. He executed. We worked on a balance together. That's a team. That's teamwork. That's a relationship. That's success, right? That's building the team.
That's what we all strive for, right? Like, why do we do this? Why do we show up to the office? Why do we put in 50 to 60 hours a week and sometimes more to make this thing a reality? Because we enjoy the journey that we're on, and we should be invigorated by it. Like, we should be champions for it. And I agree. Like, if you find someone that can provide the effective and constructive feedback, but like any change management, any change leadership, there are always going to be stragglers. There are always going to be certain individuals that are just looking to make life easier. But you have to keep chipping away at that, making it better until it becomes less complaining, and hopefully that tune changes.
That's right.
And for me, I think that's what I'm always looking for, is if I can turn the most negative naysayer into, wow, it's all right to work with this person, I'm feeling very confident, then I think across the organization, your championship of security, of that practice becomes that much stronger. But Paul, to like your point about, trust but verify, us being folks in the security space of distrust, right? Like, you start from 0 and you have to get to, 85 to 100% before we allow you to do whatever you want. I think there's an element of assuming positive intent that many of us don't learn early in our security careers, because maybe we're doing pen tests, maybe we're trying to bilk a process, maybe we're trying to bypass a security guard to get into the data center. And I think those levels of confidence are much different than partnership that you're building within an organization. But I think if you take that step back and again, ask yourself, why are we doing this? You have to assume positive intent, and you have to try to drive towards that brighter future.
And I also think there's a great leadership lesson in here too, especially as I'm right now filling in as the primary developer for software, right? I think we also, many of us develop over time, that I wish I had learned earlier in my career, to distrust what you've built yourself, right? When someone comes to you and reports a problem and says, it's the firewall, says it's the security control, says it's your software, there's, I worked in IT right in the beginning, it's some kind of IT issue, we tend to think, well, it's not. There's nothing. I didn't make any changes. It wasn't my thing. I think as we grow as leaders, we take that feedback as similar to what you were describing. We say, all right, let's threat model. Let's say it is my problem, because I've been around long enough to know that probably it is my problem. It probably is my code, right? Because I make mistakes. Let me go verify that. Yeah. And take all that feedback seriously and give them positive feedback. Say, I checked into this and it's this. Right?
As you mature as a leader, you kind of take the ego and you bring it down, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're an effective leader, that overconfidence, and we're going to talk about this later in the leadership articles, that overconfidence is just a detractor. That's all it's going to do when you're trying to build a relationship, is become a detractor to you.
And that's going to slow you down.
Absolutely.
I don't think either, any of us would be that successful if we had carried that forward, right? If we sit here and every bug that user reports, we go, that's not my problem. You're going to spend 2 to 3 times as long. Whereas if you just threat model it, like, what if I did make a bug and then, that was mine. And you know what? Now it's fixed. Now I can go back quicker and say it's fixed.
A wise man once said, check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Best protect your neck.
which is why I have about website issues on my list, and I've gotten through a good 5 or 6 of them because you're right. Wrong URL. Oh, that window shouldn't pop up. I mean, it happens all the time, right? Which is why it'll take us a little while to tweak through the new website.
Well, and so that brings up a question for Ty.
Yeah.
You've spent a lot of time in software security. Is the QA team going away? And I don't think it is, but in your opinion, what's happening in the kind of progression of the QA team now in the DevOps environments?
I think it varies by organization. It depends on how your test harness is built out. And I've seen it where it's modularized into the full stack team where a dedicated QA person becomes a part of it, but then they start extending into full-time engineer as well. The flip side to that, dedicated QA functions that span globally, and then you have a certain outsource function for maybe mobile, that can also exist. I don't think there's a right size for anything for QA at this point. It really depends on your product and what risk are you willing to take. And I think there are some organizations that don't want to wait for the consumer or the business to report a bug.
Right.
And I think that tolerance when it comes to quality is an important element. So how your contracts are written, what you want to do as a business, when it comes to that risk tolerance, I think are going to define how you build out QA. My hope and dream is to continue to build that specific partnership in the security lifecycle. When you're building out your threat model, when you've tested your hacker stories, or you know exactly what those high-risk scenarios are for that product, that feature, et cetera, why not automate it? And why not build friends in with the QA team to have that as a check? Because how many times, I don't know if you guys have been through this, we fix a bug, we had a rollback, we reintroduced the bug, and it's like, shit, right? We should have caught that.
And it just as we move faster, there's I believe so many more ways you can introduce a bug, and those can be exposed more quickly, right? That's my concern today. In waterfall development, we took months, right?
Yep.
And we likely stumbled across things. Like I introduced a ridiculous bug, ridiculous for a lot of reasons, ridiculously stupid on my part, ridiculously in the grandiose sense of I disabled authentication for the entire app. Oops, right? But how do you find that? Because I sat back, I'm like, that bug could really still crop up again if you're not testing for specific conditions. And then you start thinking, what other conditions? So, Tom, my question for you, AppSec related again, how do you be certain that you've got the right test set? And then what do you do to iterate to constantly improve that test set? Because I feel like you're never done, right?
Yep. There's a big part of acceptance on your own individual part where I think it's a pivot of the mindset. And I think you introduced a scenario most of us think about. If we're in a traditional waterfall, it's going to be another 3 months till we patch or fix unless we do a break fix or something that has to go right out the door. But the reality is, if we can find it faster in a DevOps world, don't forget, we can fix it faster. And less folks get upset about their baby being ugly, their product having a bug, introducing an issue on their DN, like whatever it is. I think the reality becomes the blameless post-mortem, or the ability to just respond faster, becomes less stressful, and then you become less political. Right. So the opportunity there is we've removed the impediment of, well, who owns this risk? Well, it's like, I don't give a shit. I will log into, our CDN and I'll fix it, or I'll look at the person that owns the platform team and they can fix it. It really doesn't matter because the goal is move it forward.
That's it.
So I think when it comes to the CYA or their coverage, yes, sometimes there's going to be uncomfortable conversations or root cause analysis that come out of it. But the reality is the goal and the intent remain the same. You're just doing it smaller, faster, and more repeatably. So I think if you can build in that RCA condition of what it was, and then you have that test case there, you're better off. But if that thing falls through, it shouldn't be that big of a deal because your outage scenario or your software having a vulnerability, the mean time between fix becomes smaller and smaller.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think sometimes we lose sight of the mean time to fix mentality, right? That it's okay to introduce a bug.
Absolutely.
You can fix it really quickly.
Yeah.
I used to have to talk to regulators on that topic, and they did not love my answers 10 years ago. They didn't love my answers 7 years ago. I'm pretty confident, based on a lot of the work in the fintech space, checking with some friends that are still, fighting the good fight. I think there are elements where our regulators are understanding a much more effective way. Our auditors that do a lot of the compliance frameworks get it. Now it's about real security. How long can a bug be out in production before you fix it? And there are certain ones that you may not care about until it's too late. And I think that's a tough balance that we're still striving to figure out what it should be. But from a compliance and the higher level, I feel like we've shortened that knowledge gap so much that we're getting much better into the effective mindset of we get to move faster, we get to do things faster, and that's beneficial to all of us.
That's great. Ty, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Always a pleasure, guys. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Ty.
Great to meet you, Ty.
Yeah, cheers.
We'll take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.